I have to say, sorry, before we go live and I say that, I can see all the classes and the bar on the bottom, and you guys dancing to that just absolutely makes my day. So thank you guys for that for our countdown. So we are live, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I'm particularly excited today because we are bringing in a new speaker on a new topic that is very close to my heart. And I'm sure with a huge number of classes that signed up for it, that you guys are super excited as well. We've got 4 live classes so far, expecting a couple more and a whole slew on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, let me know where you're joining from, and I'll share your questions when we get started. So we are joined live by Allyssa Morris at the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So this is one of the most pristine, largest, most amazing habitats in the United States, if not the entire world. It is full of a huge slew of diverse and amazing species living in the Arctic. So we're going to learn about Arctic habitats generally, some of the amazing creatures that live up there, their diets, how they adapt to such a unique ecosystem. And we're going to learn a little bit about what you guys can do to learn more and maybe take action to help protect those amazing species too. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today, Allyssa, and take us away.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Allyssa Morris, and I am with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm so excited to be here today, and I just got like little sound bites of all the different classrooms, and I truly miss working with students. I miss just the interaction. So today I'm just very excited to work with you all. It really makes me very happy that I can share information about the refuge with you all across the world. So I have a quick presentation that we're going to run through today. And at the very end, I'm going to try my very hardest to answer as many questions for you all. So we're going to learn today. We're going to learn about the Arctic Refuge, the size of Arctic Refuge, the different habitats, what are some activities that people can do when they do visit the refuge, and also all of the wildlife and fish and different species that inhabit the refuge and why it's so important. Okay, so in the United States of America, our agency is called the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So in the beginning of our title, you'll notice the U.S. part. So we are in all of the United States. So all 50 of the United States. Refuges are basically conservation lands that have been set aside for the purpose of like wildlife populations and their habitat. So they're very important in a sense. There's no like borders or there's no gates that surround these refuges. It's just kind of open land. And in some refuges, you are able to go in and recreate and go hunting and fishing. It all just depends on the refuge. And so in Alaska, we have 16 national wildlife refuges. And I am going to be talking about the one in the upper right corner. It's like the maroon colored one. And that's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which happens to be the largest of all the refuges in the United States of America. So just how large is it? Well, this is a map of the United States of America, the lower 48 states. Hawaii is the only state that's not represented on this map. But as you can see, the state of Alaska is the form that is colored in brown or tan. And we layered that state over the lower 48 states just so you can see how big Alaska is, because it is the largest state in the United States. And Arctic Refuge is in that top right-hand corner. It's that neon green coloration in the state of Alaska. And it's about 19.3 million acres, which is equivalent to 77,000 square kilometers. It's very large. It's approximately the same size as the state of South Carolina. So the state of South Carolina is the other green, neon green formation. So you can see that this refuge is almost the same size as a state, which is pretty incredible. So the Arctic Refuge, it was set aside, like I mentioned, like all the other refuges, because of its rich habitats, and there's so many wildlife species that come to the refuge they migrate there to nest and to feed. And some species, they're there year round and they adapt to like a really harsh cold climates. but we're going to learn about the 4 main ecological regions of Arctic Refuge, and we're going to work our way from north to south. And you will notice that it is very, very different when you go from the northern part of the refuge all the way to the southern part. Because like I mentioned, it's a very, very big refuge. So there's lots of different habitats. Okay, so working our way north is the coastal marine habitat. So this is the habitat that is right along the Beaufort Sea or the Arctic Ocean. So this includes lots of barrier islands, lots of lagoons. There's 8 marine mammals that can be seen in this region, and that includes the polar bear, beluga whales, bowhead whales, different seal species. So this is way up north, and this is where there's lots of ice that covers the area. The next ecological region is the coastal plain tundra. So the coastal plain tundra is very flat. It's kind of, it's a little hilly in some areas, but for the most part, it's very flat. Like you could look on and on and on, and you might think like you're not going very far, but really it's just a really, really far expanse area. And this is an area that is super important in terms of animals that come to the refuge to nest and to migrate. So this is where a lot of birds, they're ground nesters. So you could be walking on this tundra and you can come across like a little nest with eggs in it. This is also where you can find musk oxen. So musk oxen is what is in the photograph right there. And this is also a place where, this is a picture of the tundra. And if you can take a guess of what has been traveling along the tundra, you can observe tracks. And can anyone take a guess?
Absolutely, I can unmute some microphones if we'd like. Unless
sorry.
worry,
yeah, I forwarded a little too fast. So this is caribou. So thousands and thousands of caribou travel and they migrate across the tundra. And these caribou travel in very, very large herds. And they have been doing the same migration pattern for thousands of years. So what they'll do is in the summer months, they will travel to the tundra area. And then this is where the females will calve. I'm sorry, it's more of like late spring, early summer. So that's like around like April to May. And then there's just like lots and lots, they'll forage and they love to eat vegetation and lichen and moss. And this area is just really, really rich in food sources. And so they come here, they calve, which means that they have their baby, and they'll usually only have one calf. And they'll feed their calf. And then when it starts to approach like fall time, that's when they start to migrate out because this area is very open. And it gets really, really cold in this area. So they move more towards Canada or more towards like the mountainous areas where the mountains kind of provide them some protection from the really, really cold temperatures. So the tundra is just, it looks like a really just like flat area, but there's so much diversity and so much life that's happening in this area. Okay, and then our third ecological region, and we're working our way south, is the Alpine Zone. And this is a mostly mountainous area. And this is where the Brooks Range can be found. And the Brooks Range is an incredible, just gorgeous area with these really, really large peaks. It's like the northernmost range of the Rocky Mountains, so that it extends up this far in Alaska. And so the Brooks Range, that's where you'll see lots of Dall sheep. So Dall sheep like to be up on the mountainous, very high areas. This is where you might spot grizzly bears. But yeah, it's just a very, very rugged area that goes for it's just such a large expanse, and it's really beautiful. This picture looks like a painting, doesn't it? But it's an actual photograph from an airplane. Okay, so we talked about the coastal marine area, we talked about the tundra, and then the Alpine Zone, and the last region is the Boreal Forest. So this is the southernmost part of the refuge, and this is a Boreal Forest is basically a mix of spruce and birch and aspen trees, and this is where a lot of wildlife live. And I live in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I live in the Boreal Forest. So this is the habitat that I'm most accustomed to. But as you can see, this picture shows the Alpine Boreal Forest transition. But the Boreal Forest is home to lots of bird species, owls, moose, lots of ermines, martins, lots of different types of weasels. So this area is just a very, very important area as well. Okay, so Arctic Refuge, like why is it important? Well, it is, not only is it just like a gorgeous place, but a lot of people come to the refuge because they want to experience something very different. They want to experience wilderness without seeing anybody. So we don't have any trails or any roads that lead into the refuge. It's a very isolated area, and the only way to get into the refuge is either by airplane, by like a small aircraft, or by floating in. So a lot of people do like float trips. They'll spend on average anywhere from 7 to 12 days on a trip through the refuge, and most likely they will never come across other humans during their trip. They'll actually view more wildlife than they will other humans. So it's a very, very remote experience. People come here for wildlife viewing. They come to fish. They come to hunt during hunting season. They really just enjoy the refuge because of its wildness characteristics. And it's a super, super special place. And I know that wherever you may be, whether you're in Arizona or I hear there's some students in Illinois, you might think that Alaska is this far, far distant place, which we are geographically pretty far from one another. But what's really cool is that there are bird species that nest and that are born in the refuge. And when it's time to migrate, they will leave and they migrate down to the lower 48 states. And some of the birds that you might see outside your window are the same, that they could have been from the Arctic Refuge. So there are species that connect us together, which is really, really cool considering how distant we are. So like I mentioned, there's over 200 bird species that have been documented in the refuge. Only about 25 of them actually reside in the refuge year long, and they adapt to our environments. The other 170 or 180 bird species, they migrate down to the lower 48 states and 5 other continents. So there are some birds that will go from Alaska all the way down to Antarctica, which is a super long migration. We have 37 land mammals, 42 fish species, 8 marine mammals, and you can learn all about those different types of wildlife on that link right there. But yeah, these are just some photos from the refuge. The top right corner is a little Arctic fox, just like cuddled up, just trying to brace itself from the wind in the tundra. And I actually brought an Arctic fox pelt today. So Arctic foxes are really, really cool because in the summer months, they're more of like the brown grayish color. And then in the winter, they change color. And so that helps them with camouflaging in the snow. And when they're the same color as the snow, they're able to hunt better because they can sneak up on their prey. So this is an Arctic fox. They have a really, really bushy tail. And I wish you all could just touch and feel this pelt because it's super soft and fluffy. But they're not super big animals, but they do live really up north in that tundra area. So that is a common land mammal that you might see. And then I also wanted to show you something that you might find in the Boreal Forest, and that is a great horned owl. So great horned owls, this was donated to us, to the Fish and Wildlife Service. They get their names from their horned tufts, and that kind of helps them hear a little bit better. They are amazing hunters with their sharp, sharp talons. I don't know if you all can see that up close, but they grab their prey with their talons, and then they use their sharp beak to, they don't really munch on their food, but they use their sharp beak to just kind of like pick at their prey. And they are excellent hunters, and you will find them in the Boreal Forest. And then the other two pictures on this slide, that cute little kitten right there with the blue eyes, that is a lynx. So in Alaska, we have a cat that's native to Alaska. It's called the Lynx. It's spelled Lynx. And they're the only cat that you can find in the state. And lynx are really adorable when they're born. This one was probably only a couple weeks old. And when they're born, they have really, really blue eyes that eventually change color. And they have these little ear tufts on the tip of their ears. But they grow to have really long legs, and that allows them to be really good jumpers. They can jump onto trees, and they have really big paws, which allow them to walk across the snow like snowshoes. And the lynx love to eat snowshoe hares. That's like their favorite food of all time. But yeah, they're really, really cool animals. And then the bottom right is a tundra swan. And so tundra swans, they're just beautiful to watch. And they come up to the refuge to nest. And when they come in, when you see them soaring above, they're just really gorgeous. Okay. So I'm going to end this with my little Martin friend. Martins love to live they live in the Boreal Forest, and they love to climb trees. Usually when you do see them, they might snarl at you. They look super cute, but they're actually ferocious little animals. But yeah, I hope that this short presentation might get you excited about future programs, about more specifics about wildlife in the Arctic Refuge. So be on the lookout for listings for specific wildlife programs. And thanks for coming along on this journey.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that. And yeah, let's dive in with questions. We have a whole other class on YouTube from Baltimore. We've got Ottawa, Ontario, Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Stafford Springs, Connecticut. So over 220 at least kids between our live and YouTube groups tuning in. So thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to dive in with questions. So there's a perfect natural question, Miss Writer's class in Baltimore. You talked about coming to visit. Here we go. If we came to visit for a day, what should we see first? Where would we guide them?
Oh boy.
No pressure.
That's a great question. Thank you for that. So it really just depends if you're coming in the summertime or the winter time. So for the summer, it's really hard because one day wouldn't be enough. Especially because in the summer months, we have like 22 plus hours of daylight. So in the summer months, I would really recommend doing like a flight out into the refuge and maybe doing some hiking. I think anywhere between like the tundra to the Alpine Zone is really beautiful because you could be in the tundra and you can look and actually see the Brooks Range. But there's so much wildlife viewing. And, I think just the feeling of getting dropped off by an airplane and only having yourself and your party and just being in this very remote wilderness area is just super special. So I think that's what I would recommend for a day. And then if you were to come in the wintertime, I would suggest, throughout in winter, the entire refuge is covered in snow. But something that you can see in the winter months is the Aurora Borealis. So looking up at the sky on a very clear night, anywhere you are in the refuge, because it's that far up north, you can see the Aurora Borealis or the Northern Lights. And I think that is just really fun to watch.
I'm going to leave the session right now and get on the plane. I'll be there in like 10 hours, something like that. We'll make it happen.
See you soon.
Mr. Link, I'm going to come to you in a minute. Welcome into Mr. LaVogue in North Palm Beach, Florida. So we are as far as you can be spread on the North American continent right now with broadcast. This is great. But Mr. Bocci, I'm going to come to you first. So joining us in Toronto, Ontario, where I am. So Mr. Bocci, if you want to demute your mic, you're good to go.
Hi. My class was wondering what your favorite animal that you've seen on a hike has been.
Oh, gosh. What a wonderful question. Thank you so much. So my favorite animal, the first thing that comes to mind is when I was up on the tundra and I was helping doing, so I do education and I work with youth, but I also get the opportunity to go out with biologists. That's people who study wildlife. And there's various different projects, and I was asked to help volunteer for a nesting bird survey. So they were going around checking nests of different animals, of different birds. And as I was, so you're just like walking transects, you're just walking lines along the tundra. And at the corner of my eye, I kept seeing something like white in the corner of my eye. And I don't know, like I didn't really think that I would actually see one in person. And this is when I first started working for the Arctic Refuge. And when I looked closely, I grabbed my binoculars because it was pretty far away. And like I said, the tundra can really change your depth perception or just like where things are located. And when I got my binoculars and actually looked, it was a snowy owl. And so there was this snowy owl on this mound. Sometimes they hang out on mounds, but they're on the tundra and they nest. And the snowy owl, I think, was just checking me out and just making sure everything was okay. But when it was flying, so owls have like really, when they fly, they don't make a lot of sound. They have different feathers in their wings that allow them to fly silently, which is a whole nother topic. But I didn't hear the owl fly. And so when I actually saw it and just seeing like its expanse of wings and just seeing it in its natural habitat, it was super cool. And I don't know if anyone enjoys Harry Potter, but it definitely reminded me of like I had this like mini Harry Potter experience. So I would definitely say the snowy owl for sure.
Fantastic. Hedwig makes everyone's day all the time. Fantastic. Thanks, Allyssa. All right, Mr. Linka's class, Salmon Arm, British Columbia, not too far from you. I think our closest class to you in Alaska today. So, Mr. Linka, come on in and ask away.
Hello.
Hey.
One question we had was, what types of endangered animals do you have living in the Arctic?
Yeah, so there are a couple that have been actually kind of like moved on and off the list. But bowhead whales up on the marine coast region, those are on the list, and also polar bears as well. And there's lots of threats, mostly because of the change in temperatures, so climate change. We've been seeing like a big decline in both species.
Yeah. Great question, guys. We're whipping through these. This is awesome. We're going to have so much time for questions today. So Miss Foot's class joining us in Carsonville, Michigan. If you guys want to demute your microphone, I'll put you into the broadcast right now, and you'll be good to go. Hey, Miss Foot's class. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. All right. You should be set. Perfect. Yeah.
Have you seen polar bears?
Yes, I have seen polar bears, and it's a pretty remarkable experience to watch them. So up on the coast, there is a village called Koktovik, and people, it's a native village where people live there year round. And a big part of their diet is they actually go out and hunt whale. And they love to eat the whale meat and whale blubber. And that's what keeps them nice and warm in the super, super cold months. And so after the village traditionally hunts for that whale, usually like each winter, they'll hunt like 1 or 2 whales. I mean, whales are like really, really big and provide a lot of meat. They will, they'll take all the meat and they'll process those whales. And then they'll take all the bones from those whales and they drive it kind of far away from the village. And so they have this big pile of whale bones. And the polar bears, every year, they kind of know when the village does that. And they congregate around this big pile of whale bones. And so it's far enough from the village where it's like a safe distance. But if you use binoculars, you can actually see them. And so that's the closest experience I've ever had was when I was in that village working with youth, working with students. I would drive out and watch from my truck and watch the polar bears gnaw at all these like whale bones. And that's really the only time I've actually ever seen polar bears, but they're really cool.
They are really cool. Thanks so much, Allyssa. All right. Actually, a quick note for our students. If you're keen, if you're at a class and you want to follow up on polar bears and hunting and some really cool stuff, 7 Worlds, 1 Planet is a BBC series that came out last year. And in their North America episode, they have polar bears with whales stalking them, which is really, really cool. I encourage you to check that out if you get a chance. All right, let's go to Miss Tim's third graders joining us in Chicago. Welcome, guys. Hey, everyone's got a question. It's crazy. It's chaos.
How do animals camouflage?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So animals, they, it's just kind of like in them, it's in their body. And then they know that at a certain time of the season, like temperatures play a big role in it. Their furs or their whatever's on their body just either changes color, or they might like drop some of that fur and a new fur layer kind of grows in. So Arctic foxes, for example, the one that I had shown earlier, they're more gray and more not black, but just like a very like gray color in the summer months. And then they change in the winter. And when they're all white like this in the wintertime, when you see them, when they're on the snow, you can't see them at all. Like they're unless they're moving and you're like really watching, that's really the only way that you are able to see them. The food that Arctic foxes love to eat is a lemming. It's a type of rodent. It's a really like fat little rodent. And what's really funny about lemmings is that they live up on the tundra as well, and they actually live underneath the snow layer. They live in the subnivean. They live in all these little different tunnels and holes. And they actually turn white as well. So they camouflage. So it's kind of like the prey and the predator are both camouflaged, which helps each other, stay safe from the fox. And then this fox is able to camouflage so that it can sneak up on its prey. But I guess to answer your question, it's just something they've evolved, and it's just something that animals have adapted, and it's just part of like the animal.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. All right, we're going to take a few questions on YouTube. We've got so many. There's too many already on YouTube to possibly take in this live session, which is a good problem to have. So I'll take a few, and then we'll go back one round with all our live classrooms. Our live classes, if you have to go at any point in the next 10 minutes, let me know in the chat. I'll make sure to come to you before we wrap up. We got tons of time left. This is great. All right, let's take a question from Mr. Rutledge's class. A super easy question for you. Have you ever seen mountain lions? Noah wants to know.
Hi, Noah. Thank you so much for your question. I have actually never seen a mountain lion. We don't have mountain lions in Alaska. And I've actually never been to a state in the lower 48 states or in Canada or anywhere that has mountain lions. So I've never actually seen them. I would love to see one, but I'm also like, big cats kind of terrify me.
At least you're honest. I didn't know that there were no mountain lions in Alaska.
Yeah, there aren't. Just the only cat is the lynx.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How about that? There you go. One of the widest ranging cats in the entire world. So that's unexpected. Very cool. All right. A good question as a follow-up to that. Speaking of big cats and big predators, Miss Minalt's class in Ottawa, Ontario wanted to know, what's the animal at the top of the food chain?
Oh, good question. So I would say at the very top of the food chain, you have a variety of animals. You have owls. So owls, we have the great gray owl. We have 10 different species in Alaska of owls. I would say they're at the top. Definitely polar bears are at the top. Wolves are at the top of the food chain. And then, yeah, I would say, so Alaska's Arctic Refuge is really unique because we have all 3 species of bears. We have the polar bear, the brown bear, and the black bear. So I would say all 3 of those bear species are at the top as well.
2 quick follow-ups on this. You mentioned owls being really silent flyers. So Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences does a lot of programs. They have owls live on camera, and it's really cool, and you can hear how silent their wing beats are. And we recently did a project with Glacier National Park in Montana where they talked about the differences between black bears and grizzly bears. If you're keen on bears, you can check that out, or maybe we'll do a future one with Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. How fun would that be? All right, let's take a few more on YouTube, and then we'll go back to live classes, I promise. Let's see. Monarchs and Me in Winnipeg. A fitting name for a fitting question. Are there any butterflies or moths that live in the refuge that you can share with us?
Hi, Monarchs and Me. That is a wonderful question. I am not an entomology expert by any means, but there are lots of moths and butterflies and dragonfly species. I can provide that list to you if you share your contact information, maybe privately in the chat box. But there are lots of different species for sure. I just don't have the exact types.
Fantastic. And I know, so Monarchs, you're on YouTube with us. If you want to send an email to us at ebtsoyp@gmail.com, so just our initials, exploring by the seat of your pants @gmail.com, we can get you all that information. So please do. All right, one more YouTube question. We'll take a few more in a bit, and we'll go back to Mr. Linka's class in a second. So Mr. Lavogue joining us in North Palm Beach. We've learned about gates of the Arctic National Park. Any notable differences? Anything that are the same? Can you share a little bit about that?
Hi, Mr. Lavogue. That's a wonderful question. Our friends over at the National Park Service manage gates of the Arctic National Park, and so they are located just west of us. So we're kind of neighbors in a sense. And the only thing that really separates Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from Gates of the Arctic is there's a road called the Dalton Highway Corridor, and that road leads all the way up to Prudhoe Bay, and that's kind of up to the Arctic Ocean. So our habitats at Gates of the Arctic are very, very similar in turn. Like we have the same latitude. Gates of the Arctic has more, I feel like, more mountainous areas. They have the Aragetch Peaks, but it's very, very similar. It's just managed differently because they are managed by the National Park Service, and Arctic Refuge is managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So National Park Service has more of a mission for like recreating and for like public use. So I feel like there's more visitors that actually visit the Gates of the Arctic than there are to the Arctic Refuge, but they're both very, very remote areas where you can only either fly in or float in.
Thanks, Allyssa. All right. It looks like, by the way, you are whipping through these questions. We're getting more questions in the session than we get with any 5 broadcasts, so way to go. It looks like Mr. Linka has been usurped in his classroom, and now he's out of the chair. So, Mr. Linka, student, if you want to share a question with us, go for it.
I'm good. And I was wondering if how long does winter last in Alaska?
That's a great question. It lasts too long. So typically where I live in Fairbanks, so we're like kind of sort of like right in the middle of the state of Alaska. We get our first snowfall usually like the first week of October. So I'm just going to show you all the outside of my window. We are covered in snow. And it's been like this since I think it was like October 8th or October 9th. And once it snows, it doesn't usually start melting or going away until mid-April, I would say. So yeah, that's what is that? October, November, December, January, February.
Too long, like you said.
7 months of winter. I mean, it's crazy. So yeah, our seasons consist of like summer, and we don't really have like a spring or fall. It goes from like summer straight to winter.
I have so we have all these classes that want to come up to you in Alaska. You, on the route to see the mountain lion, can head to Florida. Class. Check out the Florida Panthers there and enjoy summer like all the time. Come in the middle, come in January.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great question, guys. All right, Miss Tin's class, you guys got to go in a few minutes, but I want to come to you for another question. Come on in. Go for it.
Have you ever seen black bears?
Yes, I have seen black bears. I've seen lots of black bears actually in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and also there's like a lot of hiking trails outside, like in the Fairbanks areas, and sometimes they come into our town. Yep. So people have to be very cautious of how they store they're garbage and they just have to be very responsible. But yeah, black bears are very common.
Fantastic. All right. Ms. Foot's class will come to you guys in a few minutes. What I want to do is take a few more YouTube questions, and then we'll wrap up with some cool stuff where all you guys can learn more about the amazing refuge. So Miss Erickson's class in Stafford Springs, Connecticut, Adam wants to know, how many injured animals do you have, and do you rescue injured animals at the refuge?
Thanks, Miss Erickson. Thank you, Adam, for that question. So that happens commonly, that we'll come across, like a bird that's fallen out of its nest, or like a eagle that has an injured leg. And some of our biologists have been trained to address these issues, but that's not really like the main part of our job. So the Fish and Wildlife Service, we are like our goal, our mission of why we are an agency is for like the conservation of fish and wildlife and their habitats. So a lot of our staff are doing field work to find out like moose populations or caribou populations. And then we provide those numbers to other departments so that they can make hunting regulations and fishing regulations. Because up in Alaska, a lot of people depend on these wildlife resources for food. So we have to be very cognizant that, we're very lucky that we can drive, we can get in a car and we live on the road system and we can go to the grocery store and buy groceries, or we can have groceries delivered to our home, which is quite a luxury, where other communities, they don't have any roads. And so they depend on their backyard as like their main food source. So that's kind of like our main goal. So with that being said, when it comes to like injured animals, our biologists are trained to address these issues, but sometimes we defer to other groups. So sometimes like Fish and Game or some other wildlife rehabilitation groups, and we'll maybe help transport the animal to these rehab facilities that are more trained or have like the resources to help that animal. So we work closely with them and we might help, but we're not like the prime people to actually help injured animals.
Fantastic. Great answer. All right. One more on YouTube. We'll go to Mr. Lanzo's class in Port Hope, Ontario. How cold does it get there, and how do the animals survive that cold?
Oh, hi, Mr. Lanzo. So it can get in the Arctic Refuge in January, February is usually like the coldest months. It can get down to like negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, I don't have the calculation for Celsius right now, but it can get very, very, very cold. And so animals that are there year round, that adapt to that climate and that temperature, they have just evolved to learn how to like in the summer months, they're constantly eating and creating fat and nutrient packets and pouches and basically getting fat, so that in the wintertime they can use that storage, and that's kind of like they're not using a lot of energy to go out and hunt. And sometimes some animal species will go like weeks in time without eating, just because the temperatures are so cold and they really just like have to hunker down. Where other species, we have like little songbirds here. They're called black-capped chickadees. And it's so cold that they constantly have to hunt in order to stay warm. So they're constantly on the move. So it really just depends on the animals. Some animals just kind of hunker down and like hibernate in a sense. And then some animals just have to keep moving in order to stay warm.
Yeah, fantastic question, guys. These have been great. Thank you so much to all our classes. We have 8 classes on YouTube. We had the 4 live, so this is 250, 300 kids like all over Canada, all over the States. Really appreciate you all tuning in. We're going to have one last question from Miss Foots Group if you guys want to come up. So again, Miss Foots Group is joining us in Carson. Come on in, guys, and wrap us up.
What animal species was common?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I just got the, what animal species?
What animal species is the most common animal that you often see?
Great question. Thank you so much. So what animal species is the most common that I often see? I would have to say that there are lots of snowshoe hares. So that's probably the animal that I would commonly see if I was traveling through the refuge. So snowshoe hares are basically they look like little rabbits, but they are a huge food source for lots of different mammals like fox and lynx and wolves. And let's see what else. In the summer months, you'll also see lots of mosquitoes. So in the beginning of my slide, there was a picture of that hat covered in mosquitoes. So the refuge, if you don't have a bug net in the summer months and you go into the refuge, you will be very miserable because there are lots of mosquitoes. And those mosquitoes are such an important food source for all the birds that come to the refuge. And that's why they're so healthy, is because there's mosquitoes and lots of other little bugs that are very important in the food chain.
I love highlighting this because when I was a kid, I had no conception that Alaska or the Yukon in Canada would be this sort of hub of mosquitoes in the world. I think some scientists did an experiment where they ran, like in the peak place, most mosquitoes, they ran out of their tent and they just stood. And they stood for like 1 minute, ran back in and counted the mosquito bites. And I think it was something crazy. Like if they'd stood out for like 70 minutes, they literally would have been sucked dry of blood. Like there's that many mosquitoes. We had Adam Schultz on. He did a walk across 4,000 kilometers of Canada, and he said he would open his mouth and like 50 mosquitoes would fly in his mouth. So this is not what ANWR is always like. It's not what Alaska is always like, but there's certainly times you might want to be a little more prepared than others if you get a chance to explore. So before we wrap up, and I get sort of one last message from you, I just want to highlight a couple resources for kids. So the Fish and Wildlife Service's site on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is on the bottom of your screen now. I encourage you to check that out. What originally incited me to seek out this broadcast and bring it to you guys is a program called Into the Arctic Kingdom. So this is a National Geographic live presentation, a photographer called Florian Schultz. So if you go to this link below, there's all sorts of really amazing resources, beautiful photographs to complement everything that Allyssa has shown us today. So I encourage you to check that out. And before we wrap up, is there any last message you'd like to share with us about your own experiences in the refuge or things you want kids to take home with at the end of the day?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to share that the Arctic Refuge is really like I'm not just saying this, it's a really spectacular place. And the fact that you can go out and not, you can be out there for weeks in time and not come across another human and just really like have this it's really hard to explain if you haven't experienced it, but you just like feel like you're a part of the land and you just feel like you're just a very, very, very small part of this world when you're just encompassed in all this like amazing nature. And so like I grew up in a city. I grew up in the state of Georgia, and there was just lots of buildings and roads and cars. And it was a big change for me to come to Alaska, but not even just Alaska, but being able to visit a place where it's just super remote and just nature at its finest is really spectacular. And I guess for anyone listening in is that there's some really cool wilderness spots in the world. And yeah, I hope that maybe one day you'll be able to visit.
That is a beautiful message to end with, Allyssa. So thank you so much for spending time with us today, sharing your expertise and your enthusiasm for such a beautiful and amazing place in the world. Again, your pictures, your stories definitely inspired us to learn more and hopefully head there one day in person. So what we do at the end of every broadcast, our teachers that are left, we've sort of got in the middle of a classroom changeover. So Mr. Linka and Ms. Putt, if you want to join me in saying a big thank you and goodbye, you're in the broadcast, go for it.